The night sky over Earth was no longer dark. A massive alien ship, large enough to eclipse the moon, hovered in orbit, casting an eerie shadow over the planet. It had arrived without warning. No radio signals, no visible propulsion. Just there, silent, ominous, and watching. Within moments, every military radar and satellite went offline. Power grids flickered. The internet crashed. Across the world, cities fell into chaos as people stared at the sky, their fear growing with each passing second. Then a sound, deep, metallic, and unnatural, reverberated through the air. It wasn't coming from speakers. It wasn't a broadcast through televisions or radios. It was everywhere, as if the very air itself was speaking. Humans, you are unworthy. The voice was cold, emotionless, and in perfect English. We are the Zarkonian Dominion. We have conquered 100 worlds before yours. Surrender, and you will serve. Resist, and you will be erased. The words sent a chill through every human on the planet. Presidents, generals, and world leaders scrambled for answers. Who were these invaders? What did they want? But there was no time for debate. The sky turned red as streaks of fire rained down. The first attack came without warning. Beams of blinding white energy shot down from the alien mothership, striking Earth's largest cities. New York, Beijing, and Moscow erupted in flames. Skyscrapers melted into slag. Streets turned into rivers of molten steel. Millions perished in an instant, their screams drowned out by the deafening roars of destruction. General Alex Carter watched in horror from a classified underground military bunker. He had fought wars before, but nothing like this. This wasn't war. This was annihilation. A young officer, barely able to hold his composure, turned to him. "Sir, they took out our satellites. Our missiles can't lock onto them. We can't even see them." Carter clenched his fists. "They think we're weak." His voice was steady, firm. "They think we'll surrender." He looked around at his officers, men and women who had spent their lives preparing for battle, but never for something like this. They're wrong. Across the world, the military fought back, launching everything they had: nuclear missiles, railgun artillery, experimental energy weapons. But the Zarkonians were prepared. Their ships shimmered with an energy field that absorbed every attack like raindrops on glass. Fighter jets that dared approach were swatted out of the sky, as if they were nothing more than insects. In London, civilians ran through the burning streets, seeking shelter as the sky rained fire. A group of soldiers, armed with whatever weapons they had left, tried to hold their ground against towering alien machines. Dark, insect-like war machines with glowing blue eyes. Bullets ricocheted off their armor. Explosions barely scratched them. Then, without warning, the machines returned fire. Blue plasma beams cut through tanks and buildings alike, disintegrating anything they touched. One soldier, Private Daniel Bonner, gritted his teeth as he fired his last rocket at one of the machines. The blast barely slowed it down. It turned toward him, its energy weapon charging. He had seconds to live. Before the machine could fire, an EMP grenade rolled under its legs, detonating in a burst of blue lightning. The war machine convulsed, its systems frying, and then collapsed. Bonner turned, breathing heavily. His squad leader, Sergeant Alvarez, nodded. "Keep moving. We're not dead yet." But deep down, they both knew the truth. Humanity was losing. Fast. In Tokyo, a resistance group hacked into an alien drone, trying to learn anything about their invaders. What they discovered sent a chill down their spines. The Zarkonians weren't just conquerors. They were exterminators. They never left survivors. Every planet they conquered was stripped of its resources, its people reduced to nothing more than data to be archived and deleted. Earth wasn't being invaded, it was being erased. In Washington, D.C., the U.S. President and the last surviving world leaders met in a secure bunker. "We have to surrender," one of them said, his hands shaking. "If we don't, they'll destroy everything." Carter slammed his fist on the table. They'll destroy everything anyway. That's what they do. He pointed at the screen showing live footage of the destruction. We can't win with brute force, but we can make them regret setting foot on our planet. The room fell silent. Carter continued, his voice calm but firm. They think we're weak. They think we're going to roll over and beg. He looked around the room, making sure every single person understood. Let's show them just how wrong they are. The world was burning, but humanity was not defeated. Not yet. The air was thick with smoke and the scent of burning metal. The world had changed in a matter of hours. Skyscrapers that once stood as symbols of human progress were now reduced to rubble. The streets were filled with the sounds of distant screams, crackling fires, and the occasional deep hum of an alien war machine moving through the ruins. The Zarkonians had expected an easy victory. They had expected humanity to crumble. But Earth was not defeated yet. In a hidden underground bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Alex Carter studied the battlefield through grainy satellite footage from a hacked alien drone. He could see the towering war machines patrolling the streets, their scanners searching for survivors. He could see the hovering gunships, moving in tight formations, hunting down anything that still had a heartbeat. The military had been shattered, but pockets of resistance remained, and Carter was about to turn them into something the Zarkonians had never faced before. He turned to his team. They're stronger than us, more advanced, more powerful, but they're not ready for the way we fight. His eyes swept across the room. We don't fight like an empire. We fight like survivors. Across the planet, resistance cells prepared for battle. These weren't armies anymore. They were small, coordinated groups, strike teams operating in the shadows. The war had changed. It was no longer about who had the biggest guns. It was about who could outthink the enemy. In the ruins of New York, Sergeant Alvarez and his squad moved through an abandoned subway tunnel. The air was thick with dust, and every few seconds, the ground trembled as a Zarkonian walker moved above them. The machines were scanning for survivors, their glowing blue eyes cutting through the darkness. Alvarez motioned for his team to hold position. A drone flew past, its energy weapon humming softly. One wrong move, one wrong breath, and it would be over. Private Bonner clutched his rifle, sweat dripping down his face. He had never been this close to one of them before. His heart pounded as the drone stopped, its scanners sweeping the tunnel entrance. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the drone moved on. Alvarez exhaled slowly. "Move," he whispered. Above ground, human snipers lay hidden in the ruins, waiting for their moment. The Zarkonians had shields, but they weren't invincible. Through trial and error, the resistance had learned their weaknesses. Their armor could withstand explosions, but high-velocity rounds fired at specific angles could penetrate their joints. Their shields absorbed energy weapons, but electromagnetic pulses could disrupt their targeting systems. They weren't gods. They could bleed. And if they could bleed, they could die. As the night fell, the first strike began. In London, a group of resistance fighters set a trap. They had salvaged an old city bus, filled it with explosives, and parked it beneath a collapsed overpass. The bait was set. A squad of Zarkonian soldiers approached, their sleek, black exosuits glowing under the flickering streetlights. They moved in perfect synchronization, their weapons scanning the area. One of them paused, detecting movement in a nearby building. That was the signal. A sniper fired from a rooftop, hitting one of the soldiers in the neck joint. The alien fell, twitching. The others turned, their weapons lighting up the night as they fired blindly. That was their mistake. The second shot hit the bus. A massive explosion tore through the street, engulfing the aliens in flames. Before the dust could settle, the resistance fighters emerged, finishing off the survivors with armor-piercing rounds. It wasn't just London. Similar ambushes were happening across the world. In Paris, a team used hacked alien drones to turn their own technology against them, sending false signals that led Zarkonian patrols into minefields. In Tokyo, a group of engineers rigged an abandoned skyscraper with explosives, bringing it down on top of an alien war crawler. In Brazil, guerrilla fighters lured enemy forces into the dense jungle, using the terrain to their advantage, picking them off one by one. But the biggest blow came from space. Dr. Evelyn Graves, one of the world's top AI specialists, had spent years working on experimental cloaking technology. Before the invasion, her work had been deemed too unstable for use. Now, it was humanity's best weapon. Operating from a hidden research facility deep underground, she and her team had managed to activate a prototype, a stealth field capable of hiding entire ships from enemy scanners. It was far from perfect. It drained power fast and could only be used for short bursts. But it was enough. Carter gave the order. A squadron of cloaked fighter jets, codenamed Ghost Squadron, launched from a hidden airbase. They moved undetected through the night sky, slipping past enemy radar. Their target was an alien command ship hovering over the Atlantic Ocean. If they could take it down, they could cripple Zarkonian coordination for the entire region. The pilots held their breath as they approached. The ship was massive, its surface covered in shifting metallic plates, glowing symbols pulsing like veins beneath its hull. If the Zarkonians detected them, they wouldn't stand a chance. But they wouldn't get the chance. The fighters decloaked all at once, launching a full barrage of EMP missiles. The alien ship shuddered as its systems overloaded. Its shields flickered, then failed. Before it could react, the second wave of human aircraft fired everything they had. Explosions tore through the hull. The massive warship tilted, engines sputtering. The Zarkonians on board scrambled to respond, but it was too late. With one final blast, the ship broke apart, crashing into the ocean below. The shockwave could be felt for miles. Humanity had drawn blood. But the war was far from over. Deep in the heart of the alien mothership, High Commander Xyros watched the battle unfold through holographic projections. His expression was unreadable, his glowing yellow eyes studying the destruction of his forces. This was unexpected. The humans were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to surrender. But instead, they had proven themselves to be something else entirely. Xyros turned to his second-in-command. His voice was calm, but there was an edge of something new in it, something the Zarkonians had never felt before. Fear. Deploy the planet Cracker, he ordered. Burn them to the ground. The battle for Earth had only just begun. The sky over Earth was no longer just a battlefield. It was a graveyard. Burning wreckage from downed alien ships floated through the atmosphere, leaving fiery trails as they crashed into the oceans and cities below. The resistance had struck back hard, and for the first time since the invasion began, the Zarkonians were forced to adapt. But humanity was not done yet. The fight was only beginning. General Alex Carter stood in the underground command center, watching holographic displays flicker with the latest battle reports. The resistance had managed to destroy one of the enemy's command ships, but that victory came at a cost. The Zarkonians were retaliating with even greater force. Entire regions had gone silent. Communication lines were failing. The enemy was tightening its grip. Carter turned to Dr. Evelyn Graves, the scientist who had given humanity its first real advantage, the cloaking technology. She was already working on the next phase of their plan. Her fingers moved quickly over a console, lines of alien code flashing across the screen. "I've cracked part of their network," she said, not looking up. The Zarkonians don't just rely on brute force. They operate through a centralized eye. It's their command hub, their tactical brain. If we take it down, we take down their coordination. Carter's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. How do we do it? Graves took a deep breath. We infect it. A virus. Not just any virus, something designed specifically to corrupt their systems. If we can upload it directly into their network, it will spread like wildfire. It won't destroy them, but it will disrupt their ability to process information. It will turn their advantage into chaos. Carter nodded. What do you need? A direct connection to one of their data cores. And for that, we need to get inside one of their main warships. Silence filled the room. The idea was insane. Suicide. But it was their only chance. Hours later, a team of elite operatives stood inside a repurposed alien dropship. Their mission was simple: get in, upload the virus, and get out. But nothing about it would be easy. The Zarkonian warship was the size of a city, hovering just beyond the atmosphere. It was heavily guarded, with automated defenses and squads of enemy soldiers patrolling every level. The dropship's cloaking system would get them close, but once they were inside, they were on their own. The team's leader, Captain Renwalker, checked his weapon as the dropship trembled, entering the enemy's airspace. He glanced at the others, Bonner, Alvarez, and a few other hardened fighters who had already survived the impossible. Remember, he said, voice steady, we get in, plant the virus, and get out. No heroics. No mistakes. The ship docked undetected, its cloaking field masking its presence. The airlock hissed open, and the team slipped inside. The interior of the warship was unlike anything they had ever seen. Massive corridors lined with pulsing blue lights, the walls shifting like living metal. Strange whispers echoed through the air, a side effect of the ship's eye-driven systems constantly communicating. It was eerie, almost as if the ship itself was watching them. They moved quickly, sticking to the shadows, avoiding patrols of armored Zarkonian soldiers. Each step brought them closer to their target, a massive cylindrical core pulsating with energy. This was the heart of the ship's intelligence system, the place where the virus had to be planted. Graves, who had insisted on being part of the mission, moved to the console. Her hands flew over the alien controls as she connected a modified data drive. The screen flickered, alien symbols flashing as the virus began its work. Then alarms blared. The ship knew. Metallic doors slammed shut behind them, and the walls seemed to shift, sealing off escape routes. From the far end of the corridor, Zarkonian soldiers appeared, their weapons charging. "Get ready," Walker shouted, raising his rifle. The battle was instant and brutal. Plasma fire filled the air as the team fought back. Bonner took down 2 enemies with precise headshots, while Alvarez hurled an explosive charge, sending another group flying. But for every alien they killed, more kept coming. The ship was trying to trap them, to crush them like insects. Graves screamed as a Zarkonian warrior lunged at her, its massive clawed hand swiping toward her throat. Before it could strike, Walker tackled it, shoving his knife into the gap between its armor. The alien let out a guttural roar before collapsing. The virus. How long? Carter's voice crackled through their comms. Graves didn't stop typing. Almost there. The lights flickered. A strange noise filled the room, something between a mechanical screech and a deep, angry growl. The ship was fighting back. Then, suddenly, everything went dark. The virus had taken hold. Across the entire warship, systems flickered and failed. Doors malfunctioned, energy shields collapsed, and the AI's calculations became erratic. The Zarkonian soldiers hesitated, momentarily disoriented. That hesitation was all the resistance needed. "Move," Walker shouted. The team pushed forward, cutting down the remaining enemies and sprinting toward their extraction point. Behind them, the warship trembled, its once perfect order breaking into chaos. Outside, the battle in the sky was shifting. Other resistance forces had been waiting for this moment. Human fighters, once outmatched by the alien fleet, now had an opening. They struck with everything they had. Missiles tore through disabled ships. EMP blasts fried enemy targeting systems. The battlefield, once dominated by the Zarkonians, now belonged to Earth. Inside the warship, the team reached the docking bay just as their drop ship decloaked. They dove inside, barely making it as the ship launched back toward Earth. Behind them, the enemy vessel began to spiral, losing control, its systems collapsing from within. As they entered the atmosphere, Carter's voice came through again. Did it work? Walker grinned. See for yourself. On the monitors, Zarkonian warships were colliding, their formations breaking apart. The once coordinated enemy now moved erratically, their AI struggling to recover. The virus hadn't destroyed them, but it had turned their greatest strength into their greatest weakness. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity had the upper hand. But deep within the Zarkonian mothership, High Commander Xyros was not defeated. He watched the chaos unfold, his expression unreadable. Slowly, he turned to his advisors. Enough games, he said. Prepare the planet Cracker. The battle was far from over. The sky burned. Wreckage from crippled Zarkonian ships rained down like falling stars, crashing into ruined cities, sending shockwaves through the shattered streets. Humanity had struck a powerful blow, but victory was not yet in their grasp. The enemy still had one final weapon. General Carter stood in the underground command center, his jaw tight, as he watched the incoming transmission. The holographic display flickered, showing a colossal structure emerging from the Zarkonian mothership, an enormous, rotating superweapon. Its design was terrifying, unlike anything humans had ever seen. A massive ring of shifting metal, pulsing with dark energy, began to align itself toward Earth. Graves gasped, her face pale. That's it, she whispered. The planet Cracker. Carter didn't need an explanation. He could already see what it was meant to do. The weapon's calculations were cold, efficient. It wasn't designed for battle. It was designed for annihilation. One blast, and Earth would be nothing more than dust drifting in space. The Zarkonians were done playing games. They weren't here to conquer anymore. They were here to erase. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what it meant. There would be no hiding, no running. They had minutes, maybe an hour at best, before the weapon charged to full power. Carter turned to his officers. Options. Alvarez, still battered from the last mission, wiped blood from his forehead. We can't fight that thing from down here. We need to take it out at the source. Walker nodded. We just crippled their fleet. Their command structure is in chaos. If we can get a team on board and destroy that thing before it fires. It's suicide, Graves said, shaking her head. That ship is still the most fortified place in the system. After what we did to their eye, they'll be expecting us. Carter's gaze was hard. We don't have a choice. The room was silent again. Everyone knew what this mission meant. The chance of coming back was almost zero, but there was no hesitation. They had already seen what the Zarkonians were capable of. Surrender was not an option. The team was assembled quickly. Walker, Alvarez, Bonner, and a handful of the best fighters left. Graves stayed behind, guiding them remotely. The plan was reckless, desperate, but it was all they had. A stolen Zarkonian dropship, still cloaked, would take them inside. They would plant high-yield explosives at the core of the planet Cracker. If they succeeded, they would save Earth. If they failed, there wouldn't be an Earth left to save. As the dropship left the planet's surface, the team sat in silence. Each of them knew this might be their final mission. Walker glanced at Bonner, who was gripping his rifle tightly, his usual nervous energy replaced by grim determination. You good? Walker asked. Bonner smirked. Good as I'll ever be. The dropship approached the mothership, slipping through the cracks of the broken Zarkonian fleet. Inside, alarms blared as the enemy struggled to regain control of their systems. The virus was still causing havoc, buying the team just enough time. The ship docked, and the doors hissed open. They moved fast, taking out lone patrols before alarms could be triggered. The corridors of the mothership pulsed with dim blue light, shifting like a living thing. The energy of the planet Cracker hummed through the walls, growing stronger with each passing second. Graves' voice came through their earpieces. You're close. The core is 3 levels down. Security is thick, but if you can plant the explosives, you can still make it out. They descended through the ship, fighting their way forward. Each battle was brutal, quick. They had no time for prolonged fights. Alvarez took point, using stolen Zarkonian weapons to blast through reinforced doors. Bonner covered the rear, laying down suppressing fire whenever enemy reinforcements appeared. Walker led the charge, keeping them moving. Finally, they reached the core. It was massive. An enormous sphere of unstable energy, suspended in a gravity field. Tendrils of electricity coursed across the room, and the very air seemed to vibrate with power. This was the heart of the weapon. "Plant the charges," Walker ordered. The team moved quickly, attaching explosive packs to the support structures. Each one was designed to cause a chain reaction, overloading the core and ripping the entire ship apart. Then, the door behind them slammed shut. The team spun around, weapons raised. From the shadows, a tall figure emerged, High Commander Cyros. His armor was pristine, untouched by the chaos of battle. His glowing yellow eyes burned with fury, but his voice was calm. "You fight well, humans," he said. "But this ends now." Before anyone could react, he moved, faster than any Zarkonian they had faced before. In a blur, he was among them. His blade cut through Alvarez's armor like paper, sending him crashing to the ground. Bonner fired, but Cyros dodged effortlessly, grabbing Bonner by the throat and slamming him against the wall. Walker rushed forward, swinging his knife. Cyros caught his wrist, twisting it until the blade clattered to the ground. "You should have accepted your fate," Cyros said. Walker gritted his teeth. "Not today." He headbutted Cyros, forcing him to release his grip. Bonner gasped for air and reached for his rifle. Cyros spun, his blade slicing toward Bonner's chest. Bonner shoved Walker out of the way. The blade went straight through him. For a moment, time stopped. Bonner coughed, blood dripping from his lips. His grip on his rifle loosened. Then, with the last of his strength, he pulled a grenade from his vest and activated it. "You first," he whispered. The explosion sent Cyros flying, his armor cracking as he crashed against the wall. Bonner collapsed, his body motionless. Walker grabbed him, shaking him. "Bonner." No response. Graves' voice was in their ears. "You need to go. The charges are set." Walker clenched his fists, grief threatening to consume him. But there was no time. He and the remaining team members sprinted toward the exit, leaving behind the friend who had saved them all. As they reached the hangar, enemy soldiers swarmed in. Their dropship was already prepping for takeoff. They fired blindly, forcing their way forward. Alvarez, wounded but still moving, covered the rear. They barely made it. As the ship launched, Walker looked back one last time. The charges detonated. A massive explosion tore through the warship, ripping it apart from the inside. The planet cracker shuddered, its energy core collapsing. The weapon imploded in a blinding flash, consuming the Zarkonian mothership in a fiery storm. From Earth, Carter and Graves watched as the massive structure disintegrated, the final threat wiped from the sky. The war wasn't over. The Zarkonians still had forces left, but their greatest weapon was gone. And for the first time, humanity had proven they were more than just survivors. They were warriors, but victory had come at a cost. Walker sat in the dropship, staring at the empty seat where Bonner should have been. He closed his eyes, the weight of sacrifice settling on his shoulders. This fight wasn't just about survival anymore. Now it was about vengeance. The sky above Earth was a battlefield. What remained of the Zarkonian fleet was descending fast, their warships breaking through the atmosphere, their massive engines roaring like thunder. The destruction of the planet cracker had shattered their command structure, but the Zarkonians weren't retreating. If anything, they were angrier. General Carter stood on the war-torn streets of New York, gripping his rifle as the city trembled beneath the weight of the coming battle. Resistance fighters lined the crumbling buildings, their weapons ready, their faces hardened by war. The last of the Zarkonian forces were coming. This wasn't just a battle for survival. It was the final stand. Walker and his team had barely returned when the enemy's full-scale ground invasion began. There was no time for rest, no time for grief. The Zarkonians had lost their fleet advantage, but their ground forces were still deadly. Now they were coming in waves, hundreds of drop pods crashing into the city, releasing heavily armored soldiers. Massive war beasts, towering machines of destruction, stomped through the ruins, their cannons leveling entire buildings. Carter's voice crackled through the comms. "All units, hold the line. We cannot let them take Earth." Walker and Alvarez took position near a collapsed bridge, their weapons trained on the incoming storm. "Here they come," Alvarez muttered. The first wave hit hard. Zarkonian warriors charge, their plasma blades slicing through debris, their heavy armor deflecting bullets. The resistance fired back, unleashing everything they had. Rockets streaked through the air, explosives shattered the pavement, and bodies fell on both sides. Walker ducked behind cover as a plasma shot barely missed his head. He popped back up, firing 3 precise shots. One to the knee, one to the chest, one to the head. The Zarkonian dropped, but another took its place. The enemy just kept coming. A massive explosion rocked the battlefield as one of the war beasts fired its main cannon, wiping out an entire block of resistance fighters. "We need to take that thing down," Alvarez shouted. Walker's mind raced. They didn't have the firepower to bring it down directly. But they didn't need to. "Hit the legs," he ordered. "Bring it to the ground." A squad of resistance fighters moved in, launching grenades at the beast's joints. The explosions tore through its armor, and the massive machine stumbled. As it tried to regain balance, Walker sprinted forward, planting a high-explosive charge against its side. He barely had time to dive for cover before the detonation ripped through the war beast, sending flaming metal raining down. The resistance cheered, but their victory was short-lived. From the sky, a new figure descended, High Commander Zyros. His armor, once pristine, was now scared and cracked. His glowing eyes burned with fury. He landed with a thunderous crash, his massive plasma blade igniting. Around him, the remaining Zarkonian forces rallied. "This is your end," Zyros declared, his voice echoing through the ruined city. The battlefield fell silent for a moment. Then Walker stepped forward, gripping his rifle. "Not today." Zyros moved first. He was fast, too fast. In the blink of an eye, he was among them, his blade slicing through resistance fighters like they were nothing. Walker barely had time to react before Zyros was on him. Their weapons clashed, sparks flying as Walker blocked a strike with his rifle. The force of the impact sent him stumbling back. Alvarez fired from the side, but Zyros dodged, throwing a blade straight into Alvarez's shoulder. He cried out, falling to the ground. Walker gritted his teeth. This wasn't just another enemy. This was the monster who had killed Bonner. And Walker wasn't going to let him win. He switched tactics, dropping his rifle and pulling out a combat knife. If Zyros wanted close combat, he'd give it to him. They clashed again, their blades flashing in the firelight. Walker ducked under a swing, driving his knife into Zyros' side. The alien growled in pain but didn't stop. He swung back, cutting across Walker's armor, the heat searing his skin. Walker ignored the pain. He saw an opening. With everything he had, he tackled Zyros, sending them both crashing through a collapsed building. They tumbled through the debris, fists and blades flying. Zyros pinned Walker down, his blade raised for the final strike. Then a gunshot rang out. Zyros staggered, a bullet piercing his shoulder. Alvarez, wounded but still alive, had fired his last shot. Walker didn't hesitate. He grabbed a fallen Zarkonian plasma blade and drove it straight into Zyros' chest. The High Commander gasped, his glowing eyes flickering. He tried to speak, but no words came. Then he fell. For a moment, everything was still. Then, from the comms, Carter's voice broke through. They're retreating. The remaining Zarkonians, leaderless and broken, were pulling back. The battle was over. Walker looked around at the ruins, at the bodies of the fallen, at the city that had barely survived. They had won, but at what cost? Alvarez coughed, managing a weak grin. Told you we'd make it. Walker let out a breath, exhaustion finally hitting him. He looked up at the dark sky, where the last of the Zarkonian ships were vanishing into the void. Earth was safe. For now. The battlefield was silent. Smoke curled into the sky from the ruins of the city. Fires still burned in the wreckage of buildings, their orange glow casting long shadows over the broken streets. The bodies of the fallen, human and Zarkonian alike, lay scattered across the rubble. The once mighty alien war machines stood frozen in place, lifeless, their pilots gone. The war was over. Walker stood in the center of it all, breathing heavily. His armor was cracked,